That's a neat picture taken as part of the WWH application, early 70s, of the TIC compound with Hartford in the background. It's taken from the west looking east. See how undeveloped or how little developed Hartford was compared to now. If you know, a lot more urban sprawl than that. But there are the two AM towers that they're using now on the left, far left, sorry. Over here, they're non-directional 50,000 watts for this tower during the day, and then at sunset they switch over to use both. These towers are lined up exactly within a few microseconds of arc with KRLD in Dallas, Texas, the station that they protect. When you design tower antenna sites, you have to make sure, and this was all done well before GPS, the GPS isn't even accurate enough to get by itself to get the exact bearing. Because if you're shooting at something, how far away is Dallas? 1,200 miles, 1,500 miles? If you're off by a fraction of a degree here and you project that line out 1,000 miles, you're off by a lot. So you've got to make sure that you get really, really accurate. You use several different independent surveyors. The two bases of those old towers I showed you pictures of are right there. And this was a center tuning house. The two antennas were here with a T antenna between them. And they actually had open wire line, 50 kilowatts on open wire line. That's an exciting thought. From the building out here to the center tuning. This is the Channel 3 antenna system that was put up in 1954, I think. And then TIC FM and WWH are over on this antenna here. So it's actually 4 antennas on the site. It's the only remaining broadcast site that has AM, FM, and TV all together. A lot of them have AM and FM together, and maybe one or the other. Originally this was done this way, but the TIC kept everything together, even though they're separate companies now, with Meredith owning the TV station.
That's the one with those two towers we can see in Newington?
Yes, yeah, cluster. There's actually Channel 18's towers right across the street, so you'll actually see 5 towers and not 4. This was taken before that Channel 18 tower went up.
There's 4 of them? There's 5 of them over there? Or
What's that?
how many towers are over there?
5 in the cluster.
I want to see the 2 large ones there.
Yep. Let's listen to some audio again. Again, a little bit out of order with this, but this is WCCC, FM and AM back in '73 when they were what they called playing what you're saying. All request radios. And this guy is Rusty Potts, who was legendary, and you can still hear him on WLNG and Long Island.
Triple C Hartford. Good morning, everybody. It'll be partly sunny and cold today. High 15 right now, 8 degrees below 0 at 8:57. Ladies and gentlemen, the most requested hits of all time. WCCC, AM and FM in Hartford. It's 9 o'clock in the Insurance City. This is Rusty Potts with Maximum Music. That's news. I'm Bill Neal in New York for the American Entertainment Radio Network. This of ABC News. WCCC FM and AM presents the Mayor's Report with Hartford's Mayor George Atkinson.
Picture is now in Bob Steele. This is fascinating because it's Bob Steele with a drawing, an artist's conception of the Constitution Plaza before it was built, whatever that was in the 60s sometime, the early 60s. And then you go on to that, and there's Broadcast House, which Dave worked at, and was just recently demolished, unfortunately. But quite amazing. AM, FM, and TV all in there. Anybody have any questions, you can stop me anytime. This is pretty informal. The newsroom, TIC being a news leader, as I said, with 5 or 6 old noisy teletypes clanking away in a soundproof room. Huge news staff.
And you could still hear outside. You could still hear them outside.
Yep. The Ham's Dream, this is the base of the West TIC AM tower. 50,000 watts during the day is in that. Notice the ground screen at the bottom. There's 120 radials, each quarter wavelength long, but at the base they've got copper plate and then copper screening all around there. The fencing has since been replaced. The fencing was really inadequate. Legal from an RF standpoint, but inadequate from keeping kids from getting in. That tower's got 32 amps of RF on it. You touch that, you burn your hand off, if not get killed instantaneously. So definitely not.
So what comes down to like a point, or is it?
It comes down to a point. There's an insulator there. I'll point this out. I was fascinated by that when I got started in the business. I didn't understand why, but it comes down to a point. Literally, the tower is sitting on a thumb, and it's not bolted down. And the reason being that it's a 3-sided, these are actually 4-sided towers. In the wind, they're held up by guy wires. The bottom only has to keep, the pin on the bottom only has to keep it from bouncing out, because the guy wires are keeping it from falling over. In the wind, the tower twists a little bit. And if you've got something with 3 or 4 legs twisting all the time, year after year after year, picture bending a coat hanger back and forth. Eventually you get metal fatigue. You bring it down to a point, you don't have to worry about that. And also, these insulators are highly pure electrically. They have to be to protect to keep the current flowing to the ground and the voltage. but also they have to take the weight. This tower probably weighs half a million pounds, so that with a downward force. Those insulators are incredibly expensive. You'd have to have 4 of them if you had a 4-legged tower going to the ground, 4 times the cost. So they do that, but it doesn't move much, but it moves enough that fatigue would be a problem there. Huge amount of ground. The 1 volt per meter contour for the station falls about a mile away. So if you had a 1 meter piece of wire, 50 ohms, 1 volt is induced on it a mile down the road. In the white box, I put it in my screen so you can see it. In the white box is the tuning unit. This is your antenna tuning, which is really a line tuning unit, and that's just a 50 ohms line to the impedance of the antenna. 50 kilowatt line matcher has got, as you can imagine, if you've got a kilowatt tuner at home, it's got coils like this. Well, the 50 kilowatt usually has a coil the size of a small trash can probably, and caps the size like this. This station was designed back in 1929 when there was a movement afoot to make a whole bunch of AM stations go to 750,000 watts. WLW in Ohio, Cincinnati, was the first one that actually ran 750,000 watts. They turned it on in a chicken coop a mile away, caught on fire because the chicken wire in the hay, the chicken wire was arcing. But they designed this for both the tower and the feed line and the tuning. The coils are like, much bigger than a 55-gallon drum, and the capacitors look like huge fire extinguishers. They're nitrogen filled. I've got pictures of that I didn't bring with me. I should have, but so they were all ready to go. Needless to say, with AM towers, the entire tower is the antenna. Lightning hits towers all the time. You always have to worry about components in the box here or in the tuning house. With designed for 750,000 watts, the lightning doesn't bother us very often. They can take a real beating, high current, high voltage before it.
Yeah, and also that wasn't really the best location because isn't it all rock or something up
Yeah,
there?
they said, if you read the QST article, they said they had a 250-watt portable transmitter on a trailer. Well, portable 250-watt transmitter is the size of, back then, was the size of that cabinet over there probably. Yeah. And they went to a dozen different locations around Connecticut, around Hartford, and said that was the best one. It doesn't make any sense. They don't get out the way they should, but who am I to question them? And I concentrated on some Newington stations here. Who recognizes that building?
Yeah, it's up the street.
On Willard Avenue, WKNB. Went on 1947. A guy who was a chief engineer sent me these photos. It was a very well-known station back then. Notice how clear it was behind it. This is a picture of the same place a few decades later. And of course, a picture today.
So the entire area was a field originally?
Yeah, or they cleared it. I mean, a lot of New England was field because they farmed it, of course, back in the old days. But now it's interesting. This station was 1,000 watts WCCC AM, which was actually a really popular station. It was 500 watts. And I asked some of the old timers. I said, you were up competing against TIC 50,000 watts and POP and DRC's 5,000 watts. How did you do it? And he said, the population, 90% of the population was within 5 miles of downtown Hartford back in the 40s and 50s. You didn't need any more power. You didn't have people living in New Hartford and in Tolland County and all that you tried to cover. So 500 watts, and the noise floor on the band was a lot quieter too. 500 watts covered not just as well, but for all practical purposes, good enough to get out, which is interesting. This is the guy that sent me the photos last year, the chief engineer of the station, 1947, with his, that's why I said the transmitters are huge, 1,000-watt transmitter behind them. Some people think that Bob Crane from Hogan's Heroes fame worked at a lot of Hartford stations, WBIS, WCCC, worked at WICC. I've got a historian that says that's Bob Crane, but there's no record of him working at this station, but he could have been doing a fill-in shift. Looks a little bit like him.
Looks like
Yeah, a little bit. Don't know. There's the tower, same tower from 1947, still standing, still in great shape. Pretty amazing. It took maybe a company that made ship's masts. It's just a single, it's not a structural tower, not a 3-sided or 4-sided tower, but just a pole. Let's listen to some audio
And
again.
the Armstrong Tower.
Yes. The HCN stations often do practical April Fool's Day jokes. HCN, I was working at WDRC at the time, back in 1984. WHCN on April Fool's Day morning started playing country music.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
And everybody in the industry is going, no, this is just a joke. It's April Fool's Day. Now, I actually work at CCC, and the same manager that was at WHCN is at WCCC now, Boyd Arnold, and he's the most wonderful manager that I've ever worked for, but he also doesn't screw around in the sense that he's not going to go on the air and tell his advertisers something that's going on that isn't true. So we were hearing them play 2 or 3 hours of country music that sounded legitimate, but we couldn't believe it, and then we heard this.
This is Boyd Arnold, Vice President and General Manager of the Radio Ranch, and I sure hope you're enjoying the new sound of 106 FM. HCN, Hartford's country neighbor.
Howdy, buckaroos, you found the Radio Ranch. 106 FM.
Of course, it was just a practical joke that they announced at 10 o'clock. But,
John?
I happen to be listening at 10 o'clock that day.
question? Yes.
A comment about RYM, KNB. Are you familiar with, I think it was a New Year's Eve broadcast when RYM was just a daylight station, but they did it at midnight, and it was a clear channel station,
Yeah.
and they got reports from as far away as Dallas, Texas. Are you familiar?
No,
with that?
recently or?
No, it's
Long
a
time.
while back.
Yeah, because you're allowed to go on after midnight for experimental purposes. You can't play commercials, but a daytime only station, which was back then, could actually do that legally. So
At that time, they were the only station on that frequency.
that's cool.
And that was I think it was 1,000 watts, it may have only been 500.
Now, the guy that started WKNB, or WRYM, was smart, because in the 50s, he also started WHNB TV, which was channel 30. So he was thinking ahead. TV in the 50s, UHF TV in the 50s was a real risk, and for a long time it wasn't successful. Exactly, but he also applied for an FM station, and this is a copy which I found a few months ago of their construction permit. With the FCC in broadcasting, you apply for a license, you don't get the license, you get a construction permit, which is as good as a license, because if you build it the way they told you to, you get the license. They had a license for 20,000 watts on light 100.5 frequency. That frequency is worth about, if you were to buy that station, it would be about $25 million today. They didn't build it. We don't know if they sold it to Enzo Di Dominicus, or whether they just let it lapse, and then Enzo ended up putting WRCH out a few years later. But there's actual paperwork, and the poor guys that own the AM station now, they're struggling. I showed them this piece of paper, and they said, "Well, we heard we could have done that, and I can't believe that's true."
Who was Enzo Dominicus?
He was his father actually started WHAY, which was 910, and so which is WRCH, and then they put the FM on that frequency in the 60s.
I have a question. Looks like there's like a small, like an abandoned radio station on Cedar Street, going towards New Britain.
That's not abandoned. That's
Not
still being
abandoned.
used. Still being
Yeah,
used.
that's the one we're talking about.
I got pictures of it in a second. I'll show you. Yeah, the
It's still being
WPOP.
used in that
POP,
condition.
Yeah, promotion of radio stations is key. In WPOP, I remember getting, these aren't my copies, but I had a copy of the top one, colored vinyl back in the late 60s, before anybody came out. Colored vinyl was big in the 70s.
My
but
brother had the top one too.
they were doing some cool stuff back then to promote the station. There's in the building on Cedar Street, the WPOP is still transmitting from there. This is, we think, their first 5 kilowatt transmitter. They actually operated with a lower power transmitter over, I think, on Main Street in New Britain. But we think they went on the air back in the late 30s with 5 kilowatts. This is the Westinghouse transmitter that's still there to this day. This is a contemporary photo. It doesn't work anymore. The basement of the building has got the transformers for this, and it floods periodically because they're in the swamp. But there's something very interesting about this transmitter. I was looking at it very closely when I first worked there about 15 years ago, and I looked over in the corner, right over the lower left corner, and I saw something odd. Let's see if you can spot it. See anything weird to the left of the knob, or the handle?
It's like holes.
What else do you see, though? Look at the color.
Letters, ABC.
WNBC.
WNB.
And I said, oh, they got the transmitter used from WNBC in New York. That's not unusual for stations to sell stuff. So my buddy says, no, actually, you're wrong. WPOP used to be WNBC, New Britain, Connecticut. And WNBC in New York bought the call letters from them. Who would have thought of that, huh? They were also WGTH at one point. I forget the timing of that,
Well, and WNPR was Norwich Public Radio.
right?
Yeah.
About
Weren't they
that.
WONS once, or was that?
Yes, they were WONS as well.